Recorded Books presents an unabridged recording of Deep Dish by Mary Kay Andrewss, narrated by Julia Gibson and directed by Abigail McHugh. This book is copyrighted 2008 by Whodunit Incorporated. This recording is copyrighted 2008 by Recorded Books. Chef extraordinaire Gina Foxton doesn't expect anything to be handed to her on a platter. After years of hard work, the former runner-up Miss Teen Vidalia Onion is now the host of her own local Georgia public television show called Fresh Start, and she's dating the show's producer. But when things go unexpectedly awry, Gina realizes that she's meant for bigger and better things. And now, Deep Dish.
Chapter 1. One more week. Gina repeated the words to herself as she stood on the set, her makeup already starting to melt under the hot lights trained on her. 5 more days, 2 shows a day, 10 shows, and the season would be over. She would have 2 weeks to rest, 2 weeks with no makeup, no heels, no cameras. She would let her jaw muscles relax, not smile for 14 days. No cooking either, she vowed, knowing immediately that was one promise she couldn't keep. Right now, she might be sick of smiling, sick of staring into a camera, sick of explaining why you had to let a roast rest before carving it, sick of chopping, dicing, slicing, and sautéing. But that would pass, she told herself. Just 10 more shows. "Ready?" Jess asked from just off camera. Gina took a deep breath and smiled up at the camera trained on her. "Ready." Her brow wrinkled in intense concentration as she carefully whisked the Parmesan cheese into the bubbling pot of grits on the front burner of the cooktop. "Turn the pot toward the camera so we can see the label," Jess said quietly from the table, where she usually sat beside Scott, watching through the monitor on the laptop. Where was Scott? Gina wondered. Jessica DeRosa, his assistant producer, was only 24, just a couple years out of film school, and she was probably quite capable of directing a show on her own. But Scott was such a control freak he rarely let her. Without warning, the gas flame under the pot flared up, and then just as suddenly died. Gina stared down at it, grimacing in disbelief. "You're frowning," Jess commented. "Come on, Gina, don't make it look so hard. Remember what Scott says. These recipes should look so easy a trained chimp could fix 'em blindfolded." The cameraman snickered, and Gina looked up to give Eddie a stare of disapproval. "Not funny," she said. But it wasn't Eddie, the overweight, balding veteran of 3 seasons' worth of her shows, behind the camera. This cameraman was a kid with a frizzy shock of blonde hair sticking out from under a red bandana worn pirate-like around his forehead. Where was Eddie, she wondered. Were he and Scott in some kind of meeting elsewhere, maybe over at the Georgia Public Broadcasting offices? "I'm not frowning because the recipe won't work," Gina said. "The darned stove is on the fritz again. The flame keeps flickering out. I thought Scott said we were going to get a new stove before the season was over." Jess shrugged. "I guess we're just going to make do with this one for the last week. Does it make any difference?" "Only if we want viewers to believe I know better than to try to cook grits on a cold stove." "Keep stirring," Jess advised. "And smiling." Perky. That's what Scott always insisted on. Nobody really cared how your food tasted, as long as you looked perky and happy while you were fixing it. And sexy, which was why she was wearing a scoop-neck tank top that showed off her tanned shoulders and shapely arms, instead of the bib apron with Gina Foxton embroidered on it in flowing script that she'd worn the previous season, before Scott took over the show, and her career. "Now add the cheese," Jess called, "and tell us why you need to keep stirring." Gina made a show of turning down the burner